So welcome everyone to the joint DNS OARC Center Tech meeting. My name is Dwayne Wessels. I get to stand up here because I'm chairman of the board for DNS OARC and welcome you all to our meeting. It's great to see so many people here. Keith tells me this is very likely a record for attendance, so we're very happy about that. As everyone probably knows, there was this exciting event that took place the last couple days, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the people involved in that. And I wanted to share with you this little graphic that one of us found on Instagram. This actually came from, I think, someone in India. And it's very interesting because I think to me it demonstrates the difficulty of conveying a lot of the importance of the key rollover and getting the message out to people. This graphic sort of says that ICANN says the internet is going to be off this weekend. Go spend time with your family. And unfortunately for us, we're not able to do that. We need the internet here. We have to spend time with each other instead of with our families. But nonetheless, this is just a good message in general. Maybe we should, spend more time with our families on the weekend. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Keith, and he's going to give you the updates on DNS OARC, and so will some of his other folks that work for him, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much, Keith.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne. Like Dwayne says, I think this is possibly our biggest meeting ever. It's great to see so many new faces. For those of you who are new and haven't seen my face before, I'm Keith Mitchell, OARC President. Thank you all for coming here. One of the things that makes OARC workshops possible is the support from our sponsors. So before I just run you through a few administrative points, I'd just like to thank our sponsors. In particular, VeriSign. They are our patron, which means that they don't just support this workshop, they support all our workshops through the year. So they've been our premium patron for 2018. I'd like to thank RIPE NCC, deluxe sponsor. They, in particular, are providing the connectivity for this meeting. The team got in early and extended the RIPE meeting connectivity for this. Our contributor sponsors, SADN Labs, and also VeriSign for this specific event, and our associate sponsors, Comcast, Spamhaus Detect, and Power DNS. Just like to run you through a few administrative items. First off, many of you, especially those of you here for the first time, are members of Centre. OARC and Centre, we've recognized for quite a long time that we're fellow travelers. Both organizations have had associate supporter membership of each other. We've wanted to combine the regular Centre Tech workshops, which often happen before RIPE meetings, with an OARC workshop, and the calendars and the phases of the moon have just made that a little bit challenging over the past couple of years. But we've finally done it. It's great to have material support for the workshop from Centre and to work with the Centre team on this. The program that you will be seeing is a joint effort of the OARC Program Committee and the Centre Tech Working Group chairs. So up until 10:30 this morning, there was a Centre-only session. Between now and 3:30 on Sunday, it's a combined session for both organizations, and then the final 2 hours on Sunday is the OARC member-only session, which is basically just our AGM. What is where? As I say, we're using the RIPE meeting network for connectivity, so if you didn't get it already, pick your SSID, try and use 5 gigahertz if your kit supports it. At RIPE meeting is the passphrase. And again, thanks to the NCC team for making it happen. One of the other ways that we'll be cooperating with RIPE is that I will be presenting to the RIPE working group, DNS working group on Wednesday, a summary of everything that goes down over the next day and a half. So bear with me while I take notes. If any of you are taking notes for your own trip reports or things like that, I'd appreciate if you could share them with me. That would greatly help me put together a précis for the RIPE DNS working group and the wider RIPE audience of what's going on in the DNS universe. The breaks and the catering lunch will be outside in the foyer area. If you have any special dietary considerations and you're uncertain or worried about any of the food, please speak to Dinesh or speak to any of the hotel catering staff and they'll be able to offer you guidance on that. No fire drills are scheduled for this weekend. If the alarms do go off, then basically exit via the foyer, go down the stairs and just straight out the main hotel entrance and assemble out there. Jerry Lindstrom, our software engineer. Jerry will be demonstrating various of the OARC software tools that he's been working on, again, beside the registration desk. So please do go and speak to Jerry. He's been doing a lot of cool stuff lately. Badges, if you need help from anybody, red lanyards are members of the board, staff, and PC, and they'll be able to help you out with things. First-timers, welcome. Those of you with the green lanyards, I'm sure some of the old guard will go out of their way to make the first-timers welcome. I hope that this will not just be your first time and we'll see you back again. And we'd appreciate it at the end of the day on Sunday if you could return the lanyards. As Dwayne mentioned, we had an interesting internet event a couple of days ago. We've got a session at 3 o'clock today, which will be to basically an open retrospective, open mic. The ICANN team and a few other people have some things to share. If you have something that you want to contribute to that, please speak to Anand ASAP, and he'll be coordinating that session. We also have a limited amount of time for lightning talks tomorrow afternoon. If you have a submission for that, please send in an abstract for a up to 10-15 minute slot to submissions at dnsoarc.net, and the program committee will then decide which we've got room for. Other thing that's happening is at Matt Pouncett, lunch break, Sunday lunch break, we'll be doing a PGP signing session. If you want to participate in that, please send your keys to pgpsign at dnsoarc.net by 10:30 on Sunday. We have a social event this evening. There is the option of a boat trip from just outside the hotel. So if you want to get the boat to the social event, then assemble at the dock outside the hotel by the canal by 6:30 tonight. Please make sure you reserve. There is a finite number of spaces on the boat. If we put too many people in the boat, we have another rollover event. There's room for more people, though, at the actual venue. So if you have, for example, somebody who's not registered for the workshop but wants to come along, then please use the guest registration. And it's possible to get the metro. If you get the metro M52 line, it's about 7 minutes walk from here and then to Central Station and then the ferry. That's the other way to get to the venue. Note that we will be not providing the boat back. You need to make your own way back. We're webcasting. Sorry about the slight delay while we got that up and running at the start. It's on YouTube. It's on YouTube. There's also a Jabber room. We opened the Jabber room up again for the rollover event. So basically, anybody should be able to join that Jabber room for the duration of the webcast, and in case there's anyone who wants to ask questions remotely. Please try to not make any undue beeping noises or the like from the audience. If you have questions, we have 2 microphone lines there. Please line up, and the moderator for the session will pick people. When you have a question to ask, again, remember we're webcasting, so please identify yourself and your affiliation. And we're in various social media channels. I think we've got all our slide decks except one, so thank you to our speakers for doing that. And if you have any special AV requirements, please let us know ASAP. We have a timekeeper. If you're a speaker, please remember that the countdown that they're showing you is to the end of your presentation. There is still time for Q&A at the end of that, to the end of the slot. And try not to emit any RF while you're up on the stand here. And I'd just like to say, all of our speakers are here on their own time and expense. We would not have a workshop without all their volunteer efforts, so we very much appreciate that. And I'm not going to run through this slide, but if you're not already an OARC member, please consider becoming a member. There are a range of benefits, and in particular, as well as supporting us to do not just the workshops, but all the other activities that we do. It's very much, we very much appreciate the diverse membership base that we have. So that's all the administrivia. One of the things that we do at the OARC AGM every year is that we basically have a number of reports on the state of OARC. What we did this year, because the joint scheduling, we've moved that out of the AGM, and it's basically an open presentation for anybody who's attending. So for those of you who are familiar OARC members, I apologize for the repetition of stuff that you've seen before. For those of you who are not, I hope that this will showcase the state of the organization. It's been an interesting year. A reminder of OARC's mission statement. Basically, we're here to distribute clue to help the DNS be understood better, to protect the DNS, to make it work more efficiently, to basically understand and coordinate between the operations and research community, basically try and make sure that the DNS works better and that there's good interaction around that. So what have we done this year? One of the things that we do at least once a year is something we call the Day in the Life of the Internet, where we do data collection. We did the regular one back in the spring, but we also just completed, at the request of the root ops, a special DITL. The data is still being uploaded, but we did that for the key role. So when you look at the overview graphs of the key role and you see some interesting anomalies in there, then hopefully the DITL capture that we have done from the root operators and some resolver operators will be there for researchers to delve into and try and understand that better. We did a couple of other things around the key role in terms of our community support. We provided some space here in Amsterdam for various people who had to come here early so that they weren't in the air for the key role. And we also provided the DNS operations Jabber room. I don't think I've ever seen 70-odd people in it before, but again, it was an interesting place to hang out and watch not much happening because it seems to have gone very smoothly. And I'd really like to congratulate the ICANN and VeriSign root ops and everybody else who was involved in it for a smooth and well-executed exercise. Other things we did, we've recently received from VeriSign funding to do some work for adding RSAC standard anonymization to the DNSCAP tool. We should have that ready by the end of the year, but it's very topical on top of GDPR this year, and it's great to have support to be able to do that work. A tool that Jerry completed this year and will be demonstrating is DNSJIT, which is inspired by the Drool replay tool. Allows various degrees of automation and intelligence to be added to that. That was funded by a Comcast Community Development Grant, the second one of these that we've had. I'm pleased that Matt Pouncett joined us earlier this year. So he is our new systems engineer, and Matt will be telling you more about his plans for moving OARC systems forward. I already mentioned that we did a standard DITL earlier on in the year, and with all that data being added, we also just recently did one of our scheduled annual upgrades of our storage capacity to another 125 terabytes were added to our infrastructure, and a couple of new servers as well. Other things we achieved this year, first workshop in the Caribbean region in San Juan, Puerto Rico. So that was really good. That was completely supported by ICANN. For this workshop, we have introduced a new charging scheme, which appears to have been successful. We've also introduced a conduct policy, which is primarily targeted at conduct at workshops, but also applies across all OARC activities. It's not there because we have had an issue with conduct at workshops. Actually, conduct at OARC workshops has been exemplary, but it's there with industry standards on diversity and inclusiveness and best practice. The Indico conference platform, we all love to hate it, but we did get a major upgrade to that, a new version of that, and that seems to be working well. Another new thing that you will be seeing sometime early next year is a new member portal. I know that some of you are deeply attached to its 1990s Perl interface. I'm pleased to say that Jerry has re-implemented that functionality with a modern framework. And once we have moved everything, the existing functionality across the new platform, then we have a bunch of new features that we're going to add. And again, Jerry will be demoing that outside, so you can have a chance to give feedback on that. We made a couple of governance changes, which are going to be ratified at the AGM tomorrow, which basically change the status of board directors to be individuals rather than member representatives, and also to make sure that the organization does not get captured by the same member having multiple board members. Finances, not as good story as I would have liked in terms of growth, but we're a non-profit. We attempt to track that, and I believe that we're in good shape for that. There'll be more detail about that at the AGM. And I've also had the joyful experience of banging my head against banks to try and diversify our banking arrangements. As I said, it's been an interesting year. Most years OARC manages to increase its revenue and the number of paying members. This year, for some reason, we haven't done so. It's kind of flat. It was great to have Matt on board, but the circumstances in which he came on board were not ones that I would care to repeat. So that was an interesting distraction and challenge. As I said, we used one bank. They were a pain. So we've now split into two separate banks, which was an auditor recommendation anyway, but it's a boggling amount of paperwork dealing with banks. Some of that has cost us money that wasn't in the budget, but I believe that we're still tracking, keeping the expenses constrained, even though the revenue hasn't been quite up to where it should be. Anyway, we're here, as I say, because of the support of our members. There are some very big internet names there. There are some small internet names there. Thank you all for your support. And we continue to add new members and to grow the community and awareness of it. Who have we added this year? Cox Communications, our biggest new member at silver level. I'm pleased to say that we've signed up GoDaddy at bronze and also .au as a new entity at bronze. Two new blue members, Quad9.rs, several supporter members, mostly individuals, a couple of individuals in the industry, and also the last route operator that wasn't a member, so DISA. We've also, as I said, had a few non-renewals which have cancelled that out. These are by no means a complete loss to the community. I mean, although Nominum are no longer a member, they've been acquired by Akamai, and a lot of the key people at Nominum are still very much here. Unfortunately, a couple of other losses that would have been nice not to have. So you can see there, that's reflected in the graph. The number of supporters remain constant. A net drop of 2 paying members. Which is not the first year we've done that, but we were targeted to do a little bit more growth than that. So it's an interesting challenge. Most of that was at the end of last year for some reason. We had about 6 bronze members who left, 3 before the end of the year, 3 after the start of the year. It seems like that was a one-off, and things seem to have picked up over the past month or so. We've got a few new paying members come on board. But it's hard to tell what the underlying causes are. The economy's doing great, we keep being told, but within the tech industry, there's a lot of merger and acquisition activity, there's lots of activist investors, and there's a lot of concerns about privacy. So it's by no means a straightforward story there. Obviously, we're not just going to sit and take this. We figured out that many of the members that didn't renew were people who weren't engaged. They didn't come along to the workshops. So we've made some effort to figure out others that might be at risk and reach out to them and listen to them. And if you have concerns or questions about OARC, or you need help making the case to your senior management for signing off the membership, please let us know. We can help you with that. Workshop sponsorship has also been more challenging to secure. It's been great this time. But the past 2 or 3 workshops has been much more challenging. The other thing is we have a lot of people come along and say, well, I want to be a supporter, I'm going to give you a presentation or give you data, and then a lot of them don't. And Sue places that proactively, but it's again, we are a non-profit, we need to have an eye on sustainability. We can't just give away membership for free. We need to have some kind of exchange for that. OARC governance, there's nothing very exciting here. This is, I believe, in line with best practice for most of the internet organizations in our space. We have our own legal entity registered in California. It has federal nonprofit status in the US. Our member base is pretty diverse. 100 combined members and supporters, a whole bunch of different organizations. We're self-supporting. Usually our annual revenue expenses are around $750,000. We take our neutrality very seriously. We actually have a neutrality policy. The board is elected by the members to reflect their interests. We have an executive staff of 6 people, although it's rather less than 6 full-time employees. We have a program committee who put together a great program, but they're all volunteers from the members. These are our board members for the past year, and they're all here. So by all means, talk to the board members. Again, we really appreciate their support, which is very much on their own time. This is a program committee. Again, program committee are almost all but one of them are here, and they all work really hard, both in terms of soliciting presentations, reviewing presentations, and also just being here on the ground and helping out and volunteering and making sure that everything runs smoothly. Staff, again, we're all here. We're not employees, we're all contractors. There's varying degrees in which we work for OARC or we contract for other similar organizations. Previous systems engineer William was formerly at 1 FTE. We have slightly less of Matt, but that's not proving an issue in practice so far. Yeah, we're all here, and please let us know if we can help you with anything. We have a physical office. We're a very virtual organization, but banks hate PO box numbers, you know, if you get the know your customer rubber glove department, then you know, they really don't like the idea that you don't. So I've taken an office in some co-working space near where I live. That's where we have all the filing cabinets full of pieces of paper, and that's where all the bank statements go. And it's actually a converted bowling alley, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, it works. I probably said more than I already want to about the banking saga. It makes sense for us to split our cash reserves across 2 banks because that increases the funding protection that we get under federal regulations. We need you to pay into our new bank. You should have received the details in the invoice, but it will not harm anything if you just give your finance department a heads up that they need to not just send it to the same old bank account. We still have the PO box in Belmont where our bookkeeper lives, so checks can still go there. The other thing we've just added with the new bank is the ability to process credit card payments directly. We don't need to do any funny Eventbrite arrangements there. So if you're an organization where it's less paperwork for you to pay your membership by credit card, we can now process that. Quick recap of our membership categories. Basically, you get X number of contacts who can attend workshops and be on the mailing list and have access to various other services depending on your funding level. There are 2 categories that are not open to everybody, which is supporter, where we expect some kind of in-kind contribution, whether it's analysis of data, data that is uploaded, presentation at a workshop, or publication of a peer-reviewed paper which acknowledges OARC data. We also have the blue category for small organizations who have less than 10 employees or less than $1 million revenue. Again, like supporter, that requires explicit board approval. Nearly 2 years ago now, we did one of our periodic retreats to figure out what a strategy was going to be. So obviously we're well into that now. Have we successfully executed against that? Well, 2 years ago it was clear our strategy was successful. Looking at this room, I think our strategy is really successful. As I said, we've had some challenges, so I think we maybe need to do a little bit more introspection on that. We're pretty much managing to break even, not completely there yet, but we're pretty close to it. And we've made adjustments to the membership fees and the workshop fees, which have helped with that quite a lot. I hope you feel that we've consulted and engaged with our members. If you don't, then please engage with us and we'll be happy to engage back. We've got a more structured approach to selecting where our workshops are, and I'm pleased to say that the next 2 workshops are fully confirmed. A few things, we had an idea to do more working groups and make use of the board for that. That needs more work. Data privacy, we clearly need to do some more work on that, although I suspect it's one of these things that will always require work. And you know, we are not a security organization. There are many organizations out there, but we know that operational security is an important thing that OARC contributes to. And we've also managed to focus and prioritize, I think, quite well over the past couple of years in terms of what we choose to use our limited resources for. One of our recent surveys, we asked members for testimonials, and you know, I thank you all for your really kind comments. So again, if you're in doubt about whether you should be an OARC member or whether you need material to make a case, then I hope that these testimonials are helpful. Our workshops, we do 2 workshops a year. The length and frequency of the workshops is basically a result of member preference. We also, you want us to co-locate with RITE, NANOG, ICANN, and IETF meetings, so we've been doing that. We know that that saves you time and money, some quite substantial amounts of money. It makes our costs a little bit higher, and sometimes it can be a real train wreck in terms of figuring out what the schedule of where we have our workshops. So that's why we made some changes to how we fund the workshops. But you know, it has the advantage of when we come to RITE, we can use their connectivity, and the same with NANOG, and ICANN have been very good at supporting workshops as well. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor or a patron, please speak to Dinesh. You can find details about it there. There are various benefits that we offer our sponsors and patrons. As I said, we changed how we do charging for workshops. It used to be the members were free, everybody else paid. We're now charging for nearly everybody, including the members. Members get discounted. There are some categories of complimentary, for example, students and researchers who are presenting. We still do a late fee. As far as I can tell, it seems to have worked very well. Thank you all. I know that it's another line item on your expenses not to be taken lightly, but it has allowed us, in terms of running the workshop, to not have to worry about every last penny for once. You know, we're in a really nice venue here, and 60% of our workshop costs are covered by that, and then the rest by our sponsors. So thank you for that. We also had to work quite hard to make sure that the registration policy was not too complicated. I think we've managed to achieve that. In general, that charging model will be for future workshops, except for the various occasions where we find a host organization that meets most or all of our costs. So watch this space. Workshop attendance. As you can see, this is the biggest ever, which is great. You know, workshops, in general, the variances in that graph are to do with the fact that we move around the world and we go to different regions rather than a reflection of the state of OARC or the industry. The program committee, some of our PC members have served well over the past 3 years, but there's a 3-year term limit, and you know, some of the existing program committee members may or may not be able to continue. Again, thank you to all our program committee members. We want to get the program committee for next year selected ASAP. So if you're interested in becoming a program committee member, or you can think of somebody who would be good, please send the nomination in. The latest date we want that is the 9th of November. The sooner we can get it, the sooner we can get the ball rolling for the OARC 30 program. Next 2 workshops, OARC 30 will be in May 2019. We're going to be in Bangkok, Thailand, so it's, I think, only our 2nd workshop in the AP region in a long time since we've been there. ICANN will be hosting that for us, and we will be co-locating with a bunch of other ICANN meetings, GWW Registry Operations and their IDS event. And then in a year's time, OARC 31 will be co-locating with NANOG again, and that will be in Austin, Texas in the fall. There are a bunch of things that we could do. There's always a long list of things that we could do. Our resources are finite. Some of the ideas that we've come up with and we'd appreciate feedback on are roundtable working operations discussions. You know, it used to be that if the OARC membership was so small that everybody could interact, but when you were in a big room facing the front like this, it can sometimes inhibit discussion. Maybe it'd be more useful if we had smaller member-only roundtable discussions. We'd still like to do poster sessions at workshops. We definitely need to increase our analysis capacity. It's clear from some of your experiences that that needs to be modernized and enhanced, so we'll almost certainly be doing that. We'd quite like to migrate our storage to a more efficient cluster architecture, and Matt will be saying a little bit more about that. We know that LRoot would very much like us to switch to CDNS format for DITL uploads. We think that has a lot of merits. We just need to figure out how we actually resource that. And it would certainly help us to know if there are other DITL contributors who would find that helpful or not as well. There are some interesting things we could potentially do with query analysis. You know, we're open to suggestions. Somebody gave us a suggestion last workshop. They wanted a pony, so you have a pony. Our more tangible plans for 2019, as I said, we're going to put the new member portal in service. Matt's going to tell you more about his plans for modernizing our systems management. There will be further funded software tool development. We'll be upgrading our analysis capacity in cluster, enhancing the storage architecture. I think we need to do some work on an explicit privacy policy and not just saying that our participation agreement is our privacy policy. And we have a board retreat during Q1, and if the finances support it, we'll have a staff all hands as well. Again, why become an OARC member? It's a great community. We're doing these tools and services. If you remember, you get to see which tools and services we do. We have a very cool and unique data set going back over a decade. There's definitely gold in there to be mined if the analysis is done. Sometimes bad things happen on the internet. We have a community. We have people's phone numbers and email addresses and all the other contacts for them. So that can definitely help with dealing with these incidents. And I think the other thing is that in an internet that is increasingly captured by vested commercial interests, we're a neutral organization. We're not here to boost shareholder value. We're here to make the internet a better place and the DNS work better. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, I have a few minutes, and then we'll do the engineering presentations. Okay, thank you.
So, good morning. My name is Jerry, and I work with the software at OARC. And yeah, I'm going to run down what I've been doing since OARC 28 and what's going to happen in the future. So, I think we did this page a year ago. So it's a summary of all the software we have and all the policies and how you can fund the development of the software. And some of the main tools we have is DNS YIT, which I will talk about first. Then the DNS replay tool, DNS statistics collector, and DNS cap, which capture DNS. And then packet queue, which we got from IIS in Sweden a year or 2 years ago, that you can run SQL on PCAPs that understand DNS also. So the first, this is the old slides, okay. So DNS YIT, what is it? It's a combination of parts taken from all the other software. So we have tools which understand DNS in different ways and does things with DNS. And I wanted to try and reduce the code, the duplication of code, and then I thought about, well, how about just making it like modules and then having some kind of script to pull it together and so you can change stuff together and do all kinds of stuff. So then I started looking at Lua, and there's a lot of other DNS software that uses Lua today, and it looks really good, so I started putting this together, and well, it actually works. So I presented this at OARC 28. It was a rough working version. The changes since then has been that there's no more submodules, so One of the first things I did when I started at OARC was to try and deduplicate the code by making Git submodules. So I've been pulling all the code into DNSJIT now. And that's actually my plan for the future, to replace DAC and DNSCAP with DNSJIT. Overall, there's been performance improvements, and there can be more improvements, I'm sure of that. There's also core objects representing the different network stack layers and payloads that have been implemented, and this actually comes from something called PCAP layers that was made by Dwayne will be used in DSC. There's also a new producer interface. I don't have any slides how it works, but basically you can chain stuff, and the chain was actually just one direction before, so now you can have it in another direction, so you can fetch objects also, and then, yeah, I should have put a slide on that. Well, there's also new threads and channel facilities, but everything of this you can come out to the demo booth I have set up outside, and I can show you the actual code and how it works, and yeah, we can talk about it. So one of the first things that's gonna use or uses DNSJIT is Drool. Oh, this is fine. So it's been rewritten into Lua, and if you have used Drool, there was an idea that you should have configurations for the different scenarios you have. So you have a configuration for replaying something to something because you want to replicate a scenario. That's been replaced by commands. And all of this work has been, of course, funded by the Comcast Innovation Fund. Thank you for that. So the first command out was replay, and this is basically all the features it did before, with one exception, that it only reads a PCAP. So it can't read from an interface. That's going to be another command. And I have a bunch of examples. So here is an example where you take the DNS and you replay it twice as fast. And this is done by taking the timing between the packets and multiplying it by 0.5. So you half the time between the packets, so to speak. Here's another example where you say keep all the timings, but replay it, don't use UDP, so it's only going to use TCP. And here's another example. Just blast away as fast as possible by not looking at the responses, and then starting up some threads to increase the performance. Another tool I've been working, or another command I've been working on, is the RESP-diff. This is collaboration with CSIGNIC. So they have a tool chain called RESP-diff that they use for the QAs in Not Resolver, I think. And with some work together with them, we could generalize the LMDB structure so that I could write a LMDB RESP-diff output for DNSJIT, and then replay the traffic and put everything in that. So how it works, RESP-diff, is that you have a table for the queries and then a table for the responses. And they have the original response, and then you can configure different targets. And then they do the comparison between the original responses and the target responses. So it looks something like this. So you can see Drool, RESP-diff, the LMDB path. Then you have a name for the PCAP you're replaying, and this is actually the name you use then in the RESP-diff toolchain configuration. And then you have the PCAP file, of course, and then you have the name for the target and the address for the target. So this has to correspond with the configuration you use for the respective tools. And then message diff compiles the information in the LMDB database, and diffsum is one of the reporting tools to just get an output. And this output looks like this. So you have the duration of the replay, that's 2 seconds, the number of queries and the number of responses. And then you have the differentiant. And the upstream is then what you called target here. And so it compares the original responses with the target responses. And you can see that, well, it's 0% unstable. And REST-diff also has a configuration what to look at in the DNS responses also. So you can configure it to ignore stuff or include stuff. And yeah, it's quite nice. This is the So, other updates, we had a small release for DEC. We just added another link layer support. But I've also hacked together DNS tab support. And this is actually up and running now. And you can use these resolvers from this network, both Okura and RIPE. And the data, it's an unbound open resolver, and the data goes via DNS cap into DEC. Then I use DEC data tool to put it in Grafana, which you have on the URL. So you can go in and look at the graphs as you're doing queries or abuse it, whatever you want. And I also have this up in a demo booth, so you can come and look at it, talk with me. Other stuff for DEC is just prior to coming here, we got funding from Nick AT to do response time statistics. So I think this is going to be something that many people are going to like. So it's going to look at the query and response and store how long it took in buckets. That's going to be configurable. And then, of course, you're going to have counters on all the stuff that happened outside seeing a query and response. So if you only saw the query or you only saw the response, or if you had to remove stuff because you have memory limits and stuff like that. And this, we're aiming to release this in late January. News for DNS cap, like Keith said, is that we're going to get built-in anonymization, and it's going to be based on the methods proposed by the RSEC recommendation, 040. And that's just a start, so we can add more later. And this is something I'm going to start working on as soon as I get home. Other news, the continuous integration platform I've running stuff on, building stuff and testing stuff. I've replaced Jenkins because it's just behaving miserable, especially for OpenBSD. It's just crashing and not working. And it was quite nice because BuildBot is so much faster in everything. I also reinstalled all the platforms, so these are the distribution and versions we run and test our software on. And I've been working on our next version of the OARC portal, and that's also something I'm going to be demoing at the booth, so come by and have a click around. So we're using Python Flask and Bootstrap, so it's going to look quite differently. And the first release is going to have all the functionality except that you don't have to have a PGP key uploaded to do a password reset. And of course, in the future, we want to integrate it more so that you can go in and if you have analysis servers access, you can just create your account and get access right away after you upload your SSH keys and stuff like that. So I think that's going to be really, really nice. And if you have any questions, come by the demo booth. Or do we have time for questions? If any? Yeah, okay. Any questions? Oh. Huh?
It's switched on now. Okay. All right. Hello. Thanks for the talk. My name is Aaron from AWS. I have a question about the licensing. So as far as I know, DNSJIT is GPL version 3, DRUL is as is, or DNS Capit as is. So what are the reasons for choosing a license for your tooling? Like why GPL 3, why not MIT, BSD, or any other? Thank you.
So we have licensing policies that we actually sent to the members, and there were no strong objections for going with GPL 3.0. And as DRUL is a funded project, it was their choice what kind of license it was. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you.
That's not the first one. Okay.
Hi, I'm Matt Poundset. For those of you who don't know me, the new systems engineer for OARC. So I came on in the very end of May to take over systems engineering and operations work. There are a couple of things that will be a little different from this presentation from sort of previous systems engineering reports. One thing is there's a bit of a loss of continuity. So since I just took over at the end of May, I don't really have a lot to say about the things that happened between then and OARC 28. There may be some things in there that sort of don't get addressed here. If there's anything in particular in there that you have questions about towards the end, I can try and address them anyway. I'm testing out a sort of a new format for this report. There's a lot to cover, and I wanted to be able to address as many different things as possible during this presentation to give people a decent overview of what's going on. But there's no way I could have gone into significant detail on all of those things in the amount of time that we've got. So I wrote a long-form report, which is available in the meeting materials. So that can be downloaded. It's in there as the systems engineering full report. And so it'll have a lot more detail on the things that I'm talking about here. It also mentions a few things that I'm not addressing here at all, just because I felt like they didn't need a lot of extra elaboration. But I sort of expect that there's going to be, there'll be questions here about the things I'm talking about during the presentation. There'll probably also be questions about things that come up once people have had a chance to go and read the full report. So feel free to email me or the members list, or if you have any further any things you want me to follow up on about that. So just a quick review of the things that sort of systems engineering has going on. Sort of responsible for the data archiving and analysis work at OARC. So this includes the annual and sort of extra occasional DIDL events like the one we're running right now. The management of some of the DSC collection of data, which is submitted by members. There's an RSAC to statistics that are produced by several root operators. We have a complete archive, or I believe a complete archive now of those, being updated on OARC systems on a regular basis. We have the zone file repository, which we collect, which is downloading a fair number of top-level domain zones on a weekly basis, and the root zone on a daily basis. So the root zone there goes back to 1993, which actually predates the existence of OARC even. So that collection includes things that OARC has been collecting since the service started, I believe in 2006. 6. That might be wrong, but there's a significant amount of data there that was contributed by members and other supporters to backdate the collections and fill in holes. We also have a bunch of other incidental data. We get sort of diddle-style collections from a bunch of different places, some ongoing throughout the year. For example, there's some AS112 installations that send us data almost constantly. And we have a new collection there that I'll be talking about in a bit. All this data that we collect and manage goes on to a set of file servers that are split between Fremont, California and Ottawa, Ontario. In Fremont, we have a set of 5 servers there, which have 7 separate file systems on them, for a total of about 536 terabytes of available storage. And then we have one in Ottawa, which is initially intended as a clone of all data, but since it was originally set up, the data has expanded significantly, and it's currently just a clone of what's on the first file server in Fremont. One of the things I'm going to be looking at as we move ahead is having a better look at what exactly we're duplicating into Ottawa and maybe being a little bit more deliberate about what gets copied there. We may try and prioritize the data sets a bit. So this is the general overview of what we have on all those file systems. This 125 terabyte file system added to FS2 last month was put there to support the diddle event that's going on right now. The usual procedure for dealing with these file servers is that every year we pick essentially the file system with the oldest drives in it, move the data off it, wipe it, replace those drives with something more current, rebuild the file system, and then put the data back. Every once in a while, we run into a situation like this year where we don't actually have enough room to clear the oldest file system. And the thing we have to do in that case is to add an entirely new drive shelf with new drives on it. And so with that, we get an even bigger bump in available storage. So we have a new data set that's going to be coming online hopefully in the coming week. We're testing out a new idea, which is receiving live stream query logs using syslog over TLS. So this is using syslog NG's TCP TLS features. So the first data set that's going in there is query logs from data planes authoritative servers. And these are being contributed by John Christoph as part of DePaul University's supporter commitments. As I mentioned, we have a KSK role diddle event going on right now related to the role of the root key. This started running at 1400 UTC on Wednesday. Sorry, I'm having a hard time with days of the week this week. And it will be running until 4 a.m. UTC on Sunday. Typically, this is only a 48-hour collection, but with the root key role, we wanted to make sure we capture enough time before and after both the actual key role itself as well and the expiry of the TTL. So since the TTL itself is 48 hours, we wanted to get 12 hours on either side of the beginning of the key roll and the end of the TTL expiry. But I didn't want to be up at 4 a.m. on Thursday making sure this was running properly. So we started 12 hours, even 12 hours earlier, so 24 hours before the start of the key roll, which gives us a total of an 84-hour diddle collection, which is quite long. As of last night, when I last updated these slides, we had about 5.5 terabytes of data in from 10 root server operators and 2 TLD operators. We're expecting a large amount of data to come in after the conclusion of the roll. Several of our contributors have mentioned to me that the way they're doing their internal management of PCAPs, it's just easier for them to do it that way. yeah, we're expecting that the amount of data there to grow quite a lot in the coming week or two as operators start uploading more data. As a result of that, it'll be at least a couple of weeks before this data is available for researchers on our analysis systems. In addition to waiting for the data uploads to complete, there's a lot of post-processing of data that we do to quantize the PCAPs to the same time periods, get file naming consistent, that sort of thing. Because of the large volume of data involved, it can take a week or two to run that processing. General systems and service status. In past presentations, this is usually a single bullet point saying, it's all good. That is not the case. I have a lot to talk about here, things that I'm not happy with. So the presentation I'm doing now will kind of cover the major items and sort of the highlights of those major items. As I said before, there's a lot more detail in the full report, in the meeting materials, if you're looking for more detail on any individual thing. I'm also happy to answer questions as much as we have time for at the end of this presentation. So at the last OARC workshop, it was mentioned that there was going to be an experiment being done with converting the Debian servers that OARC is running to a distribution called Devuan. So this is a fork of Debian that does not rely on systemd. For those of you who are systems administrators, you might be interested in that sort of thing. So on the surface, this seems like a fairly benign change, but it turns out to have some issues. And unfortunately, sometime between the end of OARC 28 and the end of May, this went from experiment to full-blown conversion. So every Debian system in OARC has been converted to Devuan. The issue here is that Devuan is still really a very young distribution, and as a result, its package database is incomplete. The problem this results in is that any application that's not repackaged by the Devuan managers to not use systemd, you have to go to either the developer for their own packages or to other online package repositories, and every single one of these packages depend on systemd. So that renders a huge number of applications uninstallable. And as a result, there's a large number of manually compiled applications running on OARC systems right now. Which are difficult to maintain, they're very hard to update, and they have unknown configuration options because there are no source compile directories still floating around for these. So I'm constantly running into issues where applications are not behaving as they should, and I'm not entirely sure why. And as I said, they're very difficult to upgrade. As an example, for turning up the syslog-ng service for DePaul, I wanted to run that on the existing capture servers, but I can't because syslog-ng won't install on Devuan. I had to spin up a new VM basically to run that on. And we've run into all kinds of other things where it's been an issue. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about remediation of that later. Monitoring has been poorly maintained. When I took over OARC uses Nagios to do its monitoring. When I took over, the web interface to Nagios had never been configured. And there were over 40 monitors configured that were failing. Some because the service that they were supposed to be monitoring wasn't working properly, but the vast majority because the monitor itself wasn't working properly. Most of those have been cleaned up now. It's just down to a very small number of issues. But there still remain a huge number of services that aren't monitored at all. And the Nagios installation is really difficult to maintain because the configuration styles that are used are very inconsistent. For anyone who's familiar with Nagios, it's basically some things are in system groups, other things are in service groups, and yeah, it's complicated trying to figure out where a particular thing is configured. And then on top of that, a lot of the plugins that are being used are homegrown where they don't need to be. There are perfectly fine standard monitors available as part of the Nagios distribution, and we're not using them for some reason. Our backup software is out of date and insecure. The web interface for this was not behind any IP-ACLs or even HTTP basic auth. I had to clean that up in the first couple of weeks. The backup disks are filling up frequently, so currently the number of backups that we're keeping have been reduced in order to maintain space on the backup drives. We're going to be looking at sort of a more permanent fix for that in 2019, but it's essentially going to be a budget-related item, so we just haven't been able to deal with it this year. The diddle software, so this is an example of a thing that is I've been struggling with how to talk about these types of issues. OARC has a lot of services that were originally written and designed in essentially a volunteer environment, either because we had only one person doing anything at all for OARC, or because it was volunteers doing most of the work. So there's a significant amount of our services and things were designed in this environment where getting things working and out there and running was more important than any other sort of long-term view of the service, which was the correct way to deal with it at the time. The issue here with things like this is that over the last few years, none of this stuff has really been brought forward to be good, solid, production-grade services. Diddle has some issues on the server side. This works well. This is a manageability issue. On the server side, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of separate manual steps in order to get a new diddle event set up and to manage it. There's a lot of opportunity for human error. There's a significant lack of documentation, which makes it difficult to figure out how all those moving parts fit together. I've also had some criticisms from people over the last couple of months about the client side of the diddle stuff. So I'm going to be looking at ways to make this a little better. Since it's actually working fairly well, it's not the top priority, but it's something I'm going to be considering different ways to approach. Our physical operations, so this is where we have our equipment, how things are set up, how things are racked, cabled, so on, is kind of a mess. This is photographs of the interior and the top of one of our cabinets in Fremont. As you can see, there's no cable management. We also have an issue where there's a significant amount of cabling running between cabinets, not just Ethernet or fiber, which might be expected, but also power cables, which are very heavy. And as you can see from the photos, the exit points from the cabinets are very small and they're clogged. So we have this issue now where even though we have a fair bit of free space in the cabinets, we actually can't expand very much at the moment because there's just no way to run cabling. So I'm working on a plan right now to try and clean this up, which is going to involve a lot of re-racking things, probably early next year. So there will be, when it comes time to actually do that work, there will probably be a few announcements to the members list related to outage schedules and things like that, as we have to take things offline to move them around. So we've had some issues this summer with resource usage on the analysis servers. So as part of the data collection work that OARC does, we also provide a number of analysis systems that members and researchers and other participants can log into in order to examine that data and actually do research on it. We have had a couple of cases this summer where individual researchers have managed to consume enough resources on a system that administrative logins were failing, monitoring was failing, measurement of the activity on the systems were failing. So I'm going to be putting in place some really basic quotas on things like memory and CPU use over the next little while. It's just going to be a big umbrella quota, basically. You know, all concurrent use by all logged in analysis users will be limited to something reasonable, just to make sure there's a little bit of headroom available for admin logins and things like that. So this is being done in a way that should minimally impact people's ability to do work, but still allow us to continue to administrate the systems. The election software, which we'll be using a little bit later for the board election, this is a bit of a long-term issue that's been plaguing us. The open source software that we use, called OpenSTV, open source development on that software ceased in 2011, and it was taken commercial. We have been using that open source version for basically since OARC first had a board. But the closed source commercial version disappeared this year. It has been replaced by a software as a service website. So there is now, in addition to not having new updates to the software, there is now also no documentation on this software available online anywhere. There's some kind soul who has set up an archive on GitHub of the last few open source versions, which is how we were able to get it running for this meeting. However, because it hasn't been updated in so long, it depends on software and that is so far out of, it depends on other software that is so far out of date it can't be installed on modern operating systems. So we're forced to essentially run the election out of a 4-year-old operating system. We don't have a solution for this. I don't have any good ideas for this. If anyone's aware of anything that might help here, please speak to me. We have an addressing overlap between our two sites. The back-end network in Fremont and Ottawa are using the same RFC 1918/24, which makes routing between the two sites over tunnel complicated, to say the least. There's going to be a renumbering event at some point soon to fix that up. Members won't notice, but I thought I'd mention it. Little cat break. I spent 3 days in the Hurricane Electric facility in Fremont last month. Got to meet the house cat named Cat 5. He's very friendly, but you can see from his eyes he's judging your cable management structure. So over the last few months, I've done a bunch of stuff to change how things work, how things are managed, to kind of improve things a bit. So here's kind of the quick hit list of the easily discussed stuff. There's some new systems in. One of these is currently being used as a new administrative system where I'm able to run, set up new monitoring and measurement software, as well as some other new things, which I'll be talking about in a bit. We have finally migrated away from CVS. There's an internal only GitLab service running, which is being used for internal configurations and internal only software development, so systems management things, that sort of stuff. All of the public software development and stuff will be remaining at GitHub. This is purely for internal work. There was a TLS certificate update. We moved away from our old Symantec certificates on all OARC websites this summer, and got that done in time for the Canary release of Chrome, which was going to deprecate the upstream key from all of those certificates. So we're now using a new wildcard certificate for all OARC sites. There's still remaining to be updated the TLS certificate for the AS112 project, which we manage, but that will be coming in the next week or so. And along the way, I also replaced the self-signed certificate on the Jabra server. So for those of you who use that, you should no longer get any self-signed cert warnings when you're connecting. There were some DNSSEC validation fixes. Essentially, the privacy test server that we run, which is essentially for people to test out their DNS privacy clients, was not doing DNSSEC validation at all. It is now. And the remaining recursive servers, including our open recursive server and our internal systems, were not doing RFC 5011 key roles, so they are now. That was done a couple of weeks ago, just in time for the role this week. Some bigger stuff. We had an outage of the zone file repository in June. The issue there was that during the handover, we needed to reboot a bunch of systems in order to recover root passwords and things like that. The zone file repository server did not come back up after it was rebooted. Something in the network interface, the physical network interfaces had failed a couple of weeks previously. We eventually discovered that there actually had been zone file downloads and things like that failing for a while. For whatever reason, you were still able to log into the box, but it was having issues with outgoing connections. And after the reboot, the network just refused to come back up at all. So we ended up having to rebuild this service in a new VM. This is one of those cases where we had insufficient documentation. There was a bunch of things that were not being backed up properly. So it took quite a while to piece it all back together. Total outage was about 2 weeks. Part of that was just because there were so many other things going on. I couldn't concentrate on it exclusively. But we did eventually get it back up. It's now running in a VM with double the RAM that the original physical host had. But there are still some issues with that. Most notably, there is a process in downloading the zone files where they are converted to a canonical format. That requires loading the whole zone into memory, which fails for things like .com, fails occasionally for things like .net. And on the old system, it was failing for about a dozen other zones as well. So there's going to be a process at some point where we're going to try and solve the memory issues long term. And once that's done, we're going to have to go back and sort of reconvert some of these zones to a canonical format. As you mentioned before, FS2 got a new file system. This is a stack of 25 12 terabyte disks. 24 of them went into the system, 20 to build the file system, 4 as hot spares. Since this is so physically remote from most of the staff, we keep a large number of hot spares in the event of disk failure. And then there's one on a shelf in case we need it. All right. So future things. So as I mentioned, we have a bunch of sort of systemic problems with how things are done on the systems, and the way all the issues come together, there's going to be a significant amount of work that needs to be done in order to kind of clean it up. So what this is, there are actually sort of 3 different projects here that I'm going to talk about, but it essentially amounts to a bit of a do-over for a lot of OARC systems. So the first one is re-implementation. There are a lot of the services that we run essentially need to be re-engineered to provide the same service, but using more modern technology, modern techniques, that sort of thing. A lot of the code that we run to make these services function is mixtures of shell and Python and occasionally make files, and a lot of that needs to be cleaned up, documented better, that sort of thing. All of this stuff currently runs on bare metal. There are a few applications where we run into problems with conflicts between different dependencies. So, software application A and software application B both require application C, but different versions of it, for example. So one of the things I'm going to be doing is trying to move all of these applications into containers There are going to be some beneficial side effects from this, one of which is that eventually, as I move things around, we're going to be able to build a cluster for these services, and which will give us much better availability, as well as fixing a lot of things like our ability to do updates easily and that sort of thing. And the final thing is reinstallation. As I containerize applications and re-implement them, I'll be moving them onto a system set up to run containers. As we empty out old systems that are providing services, they're going to be reinstalled, new operating system from scratch, no more no updates, just complete wipe and reinstall. But then that server will be able to join the container cluster, and we'll be able to redistribute load across that. And I'm essentially going to work my way through the entire OARC systems this way, cleaning out one machine at a time. Going to be implementing some config management, which we don't do currently. This will essentially, the idea for this is essentially for it to handle all of the things, or automate all of the things that the containers don't. So user management, distribution of config files, that sort of thing. And finally, log consolidation. One of the new services I'm going to be setting up is what's known as an ELK stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. So I'm going to be dumping all of the logs into what is essentially a large full-text search database with a big visualization engine in front of it. So we'll be able to use that to keep a better eye on what's going on OARC systems. I've also got a couple of potential projects that I'm looking at. These are probably longer-term things, may involve budget that we haven't figured out yet. These are not firm plans, just ideas I'm trying to work out. The first one is a conversion to clustering for our file systems. The large file servers have served us pretty well, but there's a high operational cost in managing that the way we do. One of those things is that we have the data gets very chunky. The data sets that we have are all, each unique data set is quite large. So we wind up with this system, this situation where, for example, we have something in the neighborhood of 50 terabytes of free storage on the old systems, but it's in these small gray chunks in the graph. And those chunks of free space are not big enough to hold any individual data set. So we wind up with a huge amount of wasted disk space. So one of the things that clustering would help us do is it would essentially consolidate all of the half petabyte of storage that we have into a single file system. So the issues about this chunkiness of the data would go away. It also reduces a lot of operational issues. We currently maintain duplications of every data set on multiple file servers. That's more duplication than is really strictly necessary because we were also running RAID and or ZFS on systems. We sort of end up with 4 or 6 copies of any individual block of data, which is a huge waste of storage, and there's a huge operational cost in maintaining those duplications because we have to manually copy that data around and try and keep track of which was the original and make sure that the data that copies of data sets remain exact duplicates. I've been trying for the last couple of months to actually verify that our current duplicated data sets are actually duplicates. So far I've managed to run analysis on, since June, I've managed to run analysis on 30 terabytes of the 400 odd terabytes of data that we have. It's really hard, sort of unmanageable. That particular issue is sort of unmanageable. And there's a whole bunch of other potential gains here. Again, talked about in a lot more length in the full-length report. The main issue here is that there's a budget hit in trying to do this conversion, and we have yet to do the math, which really involves forecasting the cost of continuing with what we're doing and forecasting the cost of clustering several years into the future to figure out to make sure that we actually get a return on that investment and how soon. Another idea that I'm tossing around, we've been, OARC in general has been talking about different ways we might improve data analysis for researchers. I've been kind of mulling over a bunch of different ideas. One thing that occurred to me recently is it might be possible to do something like use the DNS in JSON conversion to create essentially text documents of DNS messages and dump them into Elasticsearch. This would, if the idea works, it could provide a really easy way for researchers to ask some of the simpler questions that do come up periodically. Elasticsearch is an incredibly fast search system and manages clustering of data behind it very well. The potential issues here are that we would still need to maintain PCAPs or the original binary representation of the data as well. So it increases the amount of storage required by quite a lot, and it would require some experimentation. It's not actually clear it would be a useful thing to do anyway, but it's an idea. So quick conclusions on where we are. There's a ton of stuff that needs to be done, but getting it done is going to significantly reduce the operational workload at OARC. Give us much better, much more efficient resource usage, and make our services a lot more stable. And eventually that will free up, once we get through all of this, it will eventually free up our operations time to do more new stuff, particularly to experiment with ideas around analysis and things like that. I think we have some time for questions. Yeah, so if anyone has anything they would like to ask about or want me to talk about in some more detail. That is very surprising. Okay. All right, so as I said, there's more in the detailed report. Please have a look at it. If questions occur to you later about what some of these issues are or how they're affecting OARC, if you have concerns about things I've talked about doing in the future, we're happy to talk about it. I don't want to bike shed implementation details and things like that, but if anyone implementation details of future work. But if anyone has questions about how things have been going, again, feel free to post to members or to the admin list or to me personally. All right, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And I did ask Matt to be transparent and unvarnished, so I hope that doesn't leave concerns. But I think it's important that we face what we need to do and get on with it. I'm also happy to talk to any of you privately about the background to how it got that way. Okay, so 5 minutes to lunch. Lunch is served in the foyer. We restart at 2 p.m. Quick couple of things. Sorry, 2 p.m.? Yeah. 1:45, sorry. We restart at 1:45, so an hour and 15 minutes for lunch. Just a couple of things. If you didn't manage to register for the boat social tonight, after it closed, the registration closed last night, that is reopened, so there's still spaces there if you want to have another go at registering. Also, our sponsors, a couple of things there. We will shortly be posting surveys. We appreciate the feedback that we get both on the meeting logistics and on the presentations. We actually do some work with analyzing the scores that we get from the program committee review process versus the scores that we get from the surveys on the presentations to make sure that there's congruence there. So when the survey links are posted, 1, please give us your feedback. 2, I'm pleased to say that SIDN are sponsoring a $200 gift voucher raffle for one of the survey contributors. Also, when you get your coffee, the coffee breaks are sponsored by Power DNS, and they have these nice mugs that you can get as well. Okay, so we will restart in an hour and 15 minutes, and that's when we actually get down to the real workshop material.